Hannibal.com, page 26. A whole report to write on Roman times, said Benny's best friend James. He cleared some papers off the computer desk chair and sat down gloomily. Boring. Benny slumped on the couch. What's so great about Rome anyway? Falling apart buildings and people wearing sheets? We could do someone who attacked Rome. James' eyes flew down the list they'd been given in school. Maybe this guy, Hannibal. Whoever Hannibal was, thought Benny. Boring, he said again. I vote you get some books from the library. Then you can read them and write the report while I play games on your computer, he added to himself. James shook his head. We have the internet. Let's use the computer. James logged onto the internet and clicked a few keys. We'll start with Hannibal anyway, he said over his shoulder. A list of web pages scrolled onto the screen. And if he's boring, we'll try someone else, okay? Benny reached for the computer mouse. Why should James have all the fun? How about we try this page? He slid the mouse to the link and clicked. The screen spun. The mouse seemed to break off in Benny's hand. And all at once, he wasn't in James's living room anymore. Instead, he was on a mountain, and he was freezing cold. Ah! Another new soldier! Benny scrambled to his feet. In front of him stood a thin man with a sword who looked even colder than Benny. What nation are you? He asked. Benny realized that he was knee-deep in snow. I'm an American. A new one for me, the man smiled. We have soldiers of many nations, though. I'm from Carthage myself, but there are Spaniards, Numidians, Celts. My name's Nico. I'm sure Hannibal will be pleased to see you. Benny frowned as a trumpet sounded somewhere in the distance. Hannibal? Our leader! Nico clapped Benny on the shoulder. Benny shivered. Why are we here? This sure is some webpage, he thought. He looked up at the steep cliffs surrounding him. He saw the endless rows of shoulders clambering through a snowy pass ahead. Like Nico, they all looked underfed. They were armed with little more than spears. Hannibal's launching a surprise attack against the Romans, Nico explained. Unfortunately, the Alps were between us and them. So here we are, elephants and all. Elephants? Remembering the trumpeting noise, Benny whirled and stared. Behind him, several men were leading a protesting elephant down the slope. The elephant looked cold and terribly thin. What were elephants doing in the Alps? He wondered. Page 30. Surprised? Said Nico. They're wonderful animals for a war. You haven't lived till you've seen a whole line of 40 elephants and their sharp tusks showing and running toward the other army ready to attack. They terrify the enemy's horses, and the enemy himself, of course. But I fear ours won't last much longer. He drew his thin cloak around him. Already we've lost hundreds of good men, and they're better suited to the climate than the elephants are. Better keep moving, friend. It's cold. Benny didn't have to be told twice. Why cross in winter, though? He asked gingerly, picking his way across the ice. The soldier frowned. Hannibal heard that the Romans were planning an attack of their own. If they fight, we fight. Alas, summer is over, so now we must deal with ice, snowslides, wind, cold, and hunger. He sneezed. The timing was a dreadful mistake, friend. Benny shaded his eyes and gazed into the distance. The men stumbled down from the frozen path. All were as cold and hungry as Nico. Rocks fell from the cliffs, narrowly missing the soldiers. You guys must really hate the Romans, he said. Nico gave a humorless laugh. Why, our army in Carthage has been fighting with Rome for 40 years, he said. There's been a war ever since my father was a boy, and it's always the same story. Land. Those Romans barge in and take over everyone else's territory. Spain, Africa, you name it. Why, I bet they won't stop till they've conquered the whole world. Nico's skinny fists, slightly blue from the cold, clenched and unclenched. Even America? That's the name of your country, isn't it? Assuming they can find it, Benny murmured to himself. That's right, he said aloud. He wished he had a pair of gloves. It's not even any good for the Romans, you know. Nico shuffled forward through a bank of drifted snow. Fighting wars costs money, so they make everybody pay heavy taxes. The poor can scarcely manage to stay alive at all. He blew on his hands to warm them. Benny lifted his hands to do the same, then remembered that he was wearing jeans. Quickly, he jammed his hands into his pockets for warmth. Not that I waste sympathy on the Romans when they keep grabbing land from everybody else, Nico began. Page 32. But Benny's hand had accidentally clicked the computer mouse in his pocket. Suddenly, the mountains, the elephant, and Nico were gone. Victory! A familiar voice shouted next to Benny's ear. All hail to Hannibal! Benny opened one eye. He wasn't cold anymore. In fact, he thought he was downright hot in the summer sun. The mountains, too, had been replaced by a broad, flat plain. Trees lined the horizon. It looked like pictures he had seen of Italy. Maybe, he thought, with the sudden flash of excitement, he was close to Rome itself. My friend! Benny turned as Nico clapped him on the back. Benny realized why the voice had sounded so familiar. Remember me? I talked with you in the Alps a couple of years back. A couple years? Benny swallowed hard. This war was certainly taking its time. Sure, Nico, I remember. Good to see you again. What a victory, my friend! Nico was bouncing with joy. The plains of Cannae are ours. They had more soldiers, but we had an international army, and Hannibal had his great strategies. He laughed. As I said, everybody hates the Romans, even Americans like you. Long live Hannibal, winner of the Battle of Cannae, someone shouted. On to Rome, Nico shouted again. This war will soon be over, and the hated Romans will be defeated. He pulled a handful of coins from a bag and tossed them high into the air. Victory is ours! Throw your coins, friend! Benny dug into his pocket, forgetting what else was inside. When he looked up, the plains were gone and the cheering soldiers with them. Page 34. A desert stretched in all directions. Men were lined up on all sides of him. Benny thought he was probably standing somewhere on a North African battlefield. Perhaps he was not far from Carthage itself. He turned to his right and gasped. The man next to him, standing straight as a spear, was Nico, but a much older Nico. He was a battle-worn Nico, now weaponless and choking back tears. It's been a while, my friend, Nico said. A sad day to meet again. A sad place, too, here at Zama. I had such hopes. His voice trailed off. Frowning, Benny stared past the rows of assembled soldiers. They looked old and weary, like Nico. How many years had he fast-forwarded this time? Across the field he could see the Roman army. Thousands upon thousands of warriors stood with swords and shields. Between the armies, two bearded men were talking. I hope that Roman general Scipio Africanus offers Hannibal good terms of peace, said Nico. But I will mourn this day forever. We have lost. Lost? The news made Benny feel as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Not Hannibal's fault, Nico murmured. They had too many soldiers, and there was no way into the city of Rome. We fought for 16 years. He shook his head. 16 years of fighting? Benny shut his eyes and tried to think of something comforting to say. It was a hard fight, he told Nico, and I bet they'll remember Hannibal and his army for years to come. Do you think so? Nico brightened. I know so, said Benny, patting his thigh for emphasis. Again, he had forgotten what he had in his pocket. Ah, that web page doesn't want to load, said James, his voice full of disgust. Hey, let's switch to another topic. You thought Hannibal was pretty boring anyway. How about... Benny took a deep breath. Actually, that page loaded just fine, he thought. He took the mouse out of his pocket and hooked it back into place. His head whirled with questions. Why had Hannibal hated Rome so much? How had he managed to win the Battle of Cannae? How had his troops kept fighting for 16 years? What were the peace terms? Page 36. And what happened to the elephants? You know what? Benny said. I think I changed my mind. Let's do Hannibal after all.